Hey guys, welcome back to Auxano. This is Beau here with a solo episode. So, if that's not your flavor, I don't blame you guys for moving on, but this is more like a diary to myself anyway. But my podcast is off the fly when I ask the guests questions. But I'm not so talented or even comfy enough to go off the cuff when it comes to like talking to a camera on my own. This is actually incredibly awkward. I don't know how how influencers do it, but guys, welcome back to Auxano, where we discuss our guests' causes of growth. Today, it is just a solo episode, and I am going to talk about reflections. So, on this episode, it is Beau Auxano Reflections, episode 1. So, the main thing that I have been hearing with the guests is execution. So, a lot of the guests that I've had on are more often than not, they're in business. They have survived an autoimmune disease, or they have survived they have had like a near-death experience, or I find them just interesting and they have a story to tell. Some famous, some not. It's not been released yet, but I got to work with my YouTube childhood crush, Happy Slip. She was pretty big back in the OG YouTube days, but I also got to talk to and podcast with the old school MapQuest founder, Chris Hively, and the insights that he's had has been amazing. The only reason I actually decided to even start this media company, was because of him. I actually attended a business masterclass for free at the office that I'm currently at right now, which is Assembly Norfolk. Shout out to Assembly. And he was holding a masterclass workshop for the startup accelerator that is essentially inhabits the bottom floor of Assembly Norfolk. And so execution has been the most talked about subject. Oftentimes, almost every single person, I'm pretty sure every single person actually, has talked about how you should try something, and even if you're bad at it, fail forward and just execute. And if you never tried it, you're not giving yourself the purpose of life, of living to live. I actually recently, I think it was the Iced Coffee Hour by Graham Stephan, and Alex Hormozy was on his podcast. I just bought his book, $100 Million Leads, reading it, trying to implement it. And the opening line that he talked about was, so many people try to add years to their life, but many people don't add life to their years. And it really hit me hard because I felt like it was a direct jab to me almost, because a lot of my life I've spent trying to live in regard for family and honor obligations, and trying to make sure that my family was never in poverty ever again. It's why I joined the military. It's why I was working at a noodle house at 14 or 15, I think. And execution is so powerful, because if you take a chance on yourself, you just take a small bet and you leap, you'll never know where you'll go. You'll never know which ship you land on. You'll never know which water lily lands, which water lily you land on if you cross this great chasm and this great ocean of your potential and what you could be. Oftentimes I think the biggest people holding us back are ourselves. So, point number 2 for myself was taking a chance. So, I remember coming into the founders event at Assembly Norfolk and thinking to myself, what the hell am I even doing here? Because there are studios like Have a Good Day Studio. They essentially do branding, and the work was absolutely beautiful. So much more beautiful than the work that I've ever put out thus far. Even me capturing money shots of the knockout shot when I was still a combat sports photographer. None of my stuff compared to Have a Good Day Studios. And then, not only that, there was also another digital marketing agency called Astoria Agency that I was just blown away with how beautiful their work was. I stepped into their office, and I think on the wall there was like 15 85 millimeter prime lenses. Ridiculousness. And for all the photography, for all the non-photography and non-videography people, like prime lenses, we're talking like pieces that are probably around like $700 to $1,500 a piece. So I definitely felt way behind. And when I went to this rooftop social of like startup C-suites of people who are like already CEOs, who software engineers, developers, you name it. I felt my heart break. And it wasn't until that they turned around, I say they as in the people who greeted me, who looked at me and said, "Hey, it's nice to meet you in person." Or, "Hey, aren't you the guy that does the podcasts?" What a feeling. And whenever we just take a shot and take a chance, especially for me leaving the military, going from loading rifles and watching nukes, and working at the Naval Hospital, and like watching over patients, or making glasses, which was like my last like combat medic job, was making glasses, which is actually pretty dope. But if we just take a chance, and if we just get out of your own ego, your fragile pride, your doubt, your insecurities, and just attempt and just do, you'll never know where you'll go. On my end, I believe that we are going to close on a monthly retainer, and monthly retainers are essentially the client signs a contract and you're responsible for doing all their content creation, whether it be photo, video, interviewing, etc., making reels. But you could charge essentially to whatever you want. After leaving the military, I've been able to charge for projects for 100, 200. The highest commission I've ever gotten has been $2,000, so $2,000 for just photos alone. So it's been pretty crazy. I got to work with my childhood crush, Happy Slip. I got to work with the local mayor of Newport News in the city of Virginia. And then the latest like big job was technically doing shoots for the MLB. I don't watch baseball, but the fact that I can say that we've done a work for the Major League Baseball is pretty dope. And I can only thank Have a Good Day Studio and 8 Media for being willing to take us on. We were doing a Filipino-American like crossover, so I feel like it was the right time, right place, right brown boy, right rice eater. But you'll never know where you land if you just execute, take a shot, and recalibrate and engage. And I think that it takes discipline to be able to do that. Oftentimes, people are spurred through motivation, but I think that that's a mistake. Not that motivation is bad, but if you get caught up in the notion of you need to be motivated to start, you'll probably never start, which is actually what I was kind of doing. While I was in the military, I was a combat sports photographer, but I was never like a big name in it. Not that I regret it, because I wanted to do it for the art, but Anthony Pettis was I think the lightweight UFC champion, and he had a fight promotion. That was supposed to be like my biggest, well, I can't say my company's biggest ticket event, with a commission I think of almost 15 or 20K to be the media company on ground. And honestly, to be fair, like I'm not surprised that we didn't get it, because yes, like I have higher end gear, but it's not it's not like I have like Sony FX6s or like a red Komodo. Like for capturing the live events, like you would probably need that camera equipment. But in comparison to the other photographers, videographers that probably applied, I would imagine that my work was probably amateur at best, intermediate maybe. But I was always neglecting to get a little bit better. And actually, up until this point, after watching a documentary that my creative director made, I realized that I need to be the one to start shooting video too, because I'm passionate about capturing events, especially if it's just for combat sports. Like I want to be able to make documentaries, but I would never be able to do that unless I just execute an attempt. I've already attempted so many different things, from real estate investing to what is it, stock trading stocks, flipping stocks, and then starting the media company. Like why can't this just be an extra thing to try to attempt? And I have to remind myself that it's going to be an upward battle, but if you have the discipline over the motivation, you can do anything as long as you keep showing up. Because I think Kobe Bryant talks about how there are 10 things that you don't need, and I think at the top was just showing up. As long as you show up and put in effort and you put in work, it's possible. Floor? What the hell? 4,000 weeks. I was just recently on a podcast that has been unreleased yet with my older brother, and he talks about the mortality of life. 4,000 weeks is a poster that essentially forces you to think about what would you do with the time you have left. So I just turned 26. I'm still pretty young. I understand that. But I remember when I was 20, I told myself that by 26 I'd have a wife, probably a kid, and 15 real estate properties. I'm no longer dating anyone. Broke up with a lover girl. And yes, like I have my own car, 2008 Honda Civic, best car ever. But I definitely don't have 15 properties. I mean, I have 3, but I don't have 15. Did I fall short of that grand goal? Yeah, I did. Technically, I could have worked more. Instead of working 80-hour weeks, I could have worked 100-hour weeks. Instead of working on combat sports photography, I could have been learning the craft of real estate investing more. But I don't regret the choice I made, because I recognize too that I think the statistic was, in America, if you make more than 36K across the entire world, you're probably in the top 0.5% in the entire world. So in America, 34K is probably not a lot. I was living off of less when I was in the military before I got promoted. But at the end of the day, this comparison game with everybody who has more, it is dangerous. I mean, it would be lovely to keep up with the Joneses and have the Kardashians type of money. But I also recognize that that's not necessarily what I want. And the 4,000 weeks poster forces you to think about what you want with the time that you have left. And I think of freedom. So essentially, the 4,000 weeks poster, I just turned 26, so there will be blocks filled up to the point to where a person is 26. And then it shows you how long you have left to live, and then it's your responsibility to start filling in the blocks you have left. That's actually a scary thought in hindsight, but it should be motivating, because it's the time you have left. Like, you've already lived the life you've had. Are you going to continue to be in your doubt, your insecurity? Are you going to continue to toil, maybe at the corporate position, knowing you want more? Again, nothing wrong with the corporate position. I was in corporate America right after I left the military. After 6 months, after 6 months and declining several six-figure salaries, I decided to leave and to attempt the media company and to start the podcast. I also recognize that this is a long-term thing. So the podcast is supposed to be a shelf of content. There might be 50 people who watch it now, but my plan is to be able to podcast for up to 7 years. And if in 7 years something goes viral or something pops off where there's more traction, this video and the many other podcasts will be there for people to watch. Again, it's just all the motivation over discipline. Oh, God, no. Discipline over motivation. My goodness. I was opening my phone. But to kind of close off, on a very short podcast, 4,000 weeks. People often talk about YOLO. You only live once. If you're adding years to your life, what could you do to add life to your years? And oftentimes, I really do think of accountability. It's really doing a self-audit of where you're at, what you want to be, who you want to be, what identity you associate it with. And everybody is a continuous work in progress. What's actually funny is when I joined the military, I actually gained 30 pounds. I got out of boot camp, stud. I got out of A school and then essentially the combat medic training for people who don't know military terms. I got out of boot camp, got out of combat medic training, got to my advanced school, and then I got to my command, which is essentially your place of employment, and I started getting lazy. I started eating ice cream every day. I was getting really strong. I'm able to squat 370. No, actually, I can squat 400 pounds now. I could deadlift close to 400. I can bench a little over 250. So, getting strong and, XYZ, I went on a crazy rabbit hole there. With mortality and 4,000 weeks, it's choosing who you want to be and executing. You have to have the discipline over the motivation to do it. And from there, the results don't lie to you. The only thing that doesn't betray you are the fruits of the effort that you put in. And it'll show, because the hard work won't lie to you. The hard work won't nag you either. It's cold and it's calculating. And you have to be the ruler and you have to be the measurement upon which that you forge yourself, because there is no greater honor, I think, in my personal opinion, and I'm totally projecting here. There is no greater honor than to forge yourself like a tempered blade. I said it on, I think, a couple of podcasts, but how a sword is forged is it is in its raw state. It is then molten, beaded, and then it's cooled. So going from multiple degree temperature to being cooled. Then when it has its new shape, it's then molted again, beaten again, and then it's being put back into the water until it's able to be cooled. And then you refine that process until it becomes a blade, until it becomes a sword. And I think that principle with humans is essentially the same. The more you suffer, and again, I'm not saying that go out and find suffering, but oftentimes the suffering is perspective, and the suffering is based upon your response to it. Not necessarily saying that this is trauma and I'm traumatized. It might, instead of often saying, why is this happening to me? How much more we learn when we say, what does this event teach me? How can I shift my perspective so that this serves me? And I'm pro therapy. I go to therapy also, but not every single situation has to be traumatic. Sometimes in every argument, in every fight, every punch thrown, and every situation of money lost, we can find power in that suffering. We can find perspective in a dark place. But speaking of dark places, this podcast has definitely been everything I needed to make sure that I did not fall to that. Many times people say that leaving the military, you'll get post-military depression, but I think it's because of the community I've been able to cultivate, both at it was a nonprofit I was working called Recruit Military, essentially to where we would bridge the gap between military members to Fortune 500 to Fortune 50 companies, and we'd try to find veterans jobs. Those 6 or 7 months that I spent there was more impactful than my entire military career, at least in my personal opinion. It was so freaking, it just made me feel like I was working a purpose. And at that time I was doing talent acquisition of all things. So, but at the end of the day, I think that when we execute and when we have the discipline to execute and we recognize the mortality, that we would then be able to better serve ourselves in a position of power. So, guys, I think I've blabbered on long enough. I also think it's extremely awkward to just sit here and talk to a camera. Granted, I know that it's technically a podcast, but I feel weird just sitting here talking to the camera, so maybe I'll get used to it more. But I'm going to keep this episode. How long is this episode? Dog, this episode's technically 22 minutes. Wow. But with that being said, y'all, the grass is not greener on the other side. It is greener where you water. My friends, thank you for tuning in to Auxano, and be well and walk tall. Appreciate you guys.